Today we're going to start with life cycles. We're starting with birth. First life cycle. So the most interesting thing that I have about birth is the first thing that comes to my mind when you think about a child being born. I think of my 10th child being born, Menucha. So when I was pregnant with Menucha, I was in bed because it was already, I guess my whole body was already falling apart. And I ended up being in bed. And the problem with being in bed was I needed to run the whole show. You know, you have 9 children at home. And what are you supposed to do? So from my bed, I directed the traffic the whole time I was pregnant with her. And then I went into labor. Actually, I didn't go into labor. This is very interesting. In the morning, I woke up and I just thought, everything is fine. About maybe 10 o'clock at night, I said, you know what? I think I want to have the baby. And I'm thinking to myself, why do I want to have this baby tonight? Then I started to realize that my other 2 kids, the 2 kids before, which is Melly and Shayna, their birthday was on the 21st of Iyar. And I thought,
they have the same birthday?
Yes.
Wow.
Tonight is the 21st of Iyar.
Oh.
Shouldn't I have a third one on the same day? And my husband looks at me and goes, you crazy? I'm like, no, maybe I should. And I said, okay, I think we need to go to the hospital. It was 12 o'clock at night at that point. So he says, why do we need to go to the hospital? I said, I'm telling you, we need to go to the hospital. Let's go.
But you didn't
But I didn't have any contractions. Nothing. Zero. Something told me I needed to go to the hospital. I got in the car, I went to the hospital, I get up there, and I'm only about 3.5 centimeters dilated. You know, you can walk around like that for 2 weeks. Yeah. It's not a big deal. Up to 5 centimeters, they don't even care. So they said, you know what, given the point that this is my 10th child, they said to me, you go for a walk and come back and we'll check again.
It was Kaiser.
Yes, it was Kaiser. But they knew me already, so it's nothing new. And it happens to be that night was the last night of the intern that actually delivered my previous child, Shayna. So she knew me already. She goes, maybe I want to deliver this one too, but today's my last night, so you better hurry up. So I'm like, I don't know. We'll ask God. I have no idea what's going to happen. I walked around the whole Kaiser, came back, and all of a sudden,
your water broke.
No, I started feeling contractions. I said, okay, maybe. She checked. I was 10 centimeters dilated.
Wow.
Whoa.
God, how come?
No idea. This was some miracle that happened. I have no clue why. 10 centimeters dilated. I had maybe, I would say, another 10 minutes of contractions, very strong ones, and she was born.
Oh, my God.
Wow.
1, 2, 3. But you know how fast she came out? They didn't have time to put out all the stuff on the thing. All they did was the doctor ran to bring the bucket. She puts the bucket down. Menucha falls right into the bucket. So she had no time.
Wow.
And this is how Menucha was born.
So you have 3 kids with the same birthday? Your
Same
3
birthday.
youngest?
Yes.
That's so crazy, Mattie.
So anyhow, so the funny thing is that I didn't know what to name this child. And if you know that the day before, that week, actually not the day before, but a few days before, Frima's husband passed away. And Frima's daughter came to visit, and she was telling me, you know, everyone in Crown Heights now was giving this name Menucha Rachel. And I'm like, what's Menucha Rachel? I never heard of that name in my life. You know, it's the second Lubavitcher Rebbe's daughter that lived in Chevron, and she was an unbelievable woman. She really helped people a lot, and when she used to walk and give classes, a lot of classes, and one time it was raining and she walked between the raindrops. And it was some really strange story. I'm like, okay, that's what she told me. And I said, okay, whatever. I mean, in my mind, I thought I was having a boy. Don't ask me why. And then I open up the Rebbe's letters, and it says, Menuchas HaNefesh, that means rest of the soul, Menuchas HaGuf, and rest of the body. And I thought to myself, you know, the Rebbe knows what he's talking about, because this is my last one. I knew it was my last one because I knew that's it. I couldn't have any more because I was in bed, and the doctor said there's no way you can have another baby. It's just going to fall out. So I have this baby. Turns out it's a girl. And I said, now I know what the name is. It's Menucha Rachel, because she was in my house, and the Rebbe answered me, Menuchas HaGuf, Menuchas HaNefesh. It must be Menucha Rachel. So but the interesting thing is, Menucha is very bright. I actually did study Tanya the whole time I was in bed with Menucha, so I know she must be bright. It had to be. She does get all A's at school, so it's just interesting to see how these little things, when a child is still in the womb, affects the child. And after they're born, of course, it affects the child. She is a very happy child, and she's restful. She's not loud. She's not
So
doesn't
sweet.
She's
She's
nice and
yeah.
quiet.
Everybody
She's
loves her.
actually a Menucha. She's my rest.
Yeah,
Okay.
this name belonged to her. That's why she's supposed to be a girl.
Okay, so let's understand about birth. The first time that God spoke about birth was when he spoke to Adam. What did he say to Adam? Peru uravu, have many children, and fill up the land. And the same thing he said to Noah, because what happened? There was a flood, so there were no people left. So he had to also be fruitful and multiply and fill up the earth. Right? So this is the first mitzvah that the Jewish people got. Even not just the Jewish people, but I think the whole world got that mitzvah, because Adam is the father of the whole world. So the first mitzvah was puruvu, be fruitful and multiply the land. And what happens when a child comes into the world? Like we said last week, God says to the child, you matter. You're born, that means you're important.
You what?
If you're born, you're important.
You mean important.
Yeah, if you're born into the world, you must be important. What happens in the womb? God studies with the child Torah. And the minute the child comes out, the malach, angel, comes and does this. See this little piece here? Does this, and we forget everything we learned. What's the reason that you should forget everything you learned? Does that make sense?
No.
No. Why would you forget everything you learned and have to learn it all over again? What's the reason then that we learn Torah in the stomach if we forget it at the end? Anybody can think why you would learn something, then forget it, and then have to study it again? What happens?
Maybe if you learned it the wrong way, sometimes.
Nothing to do with the wrong way. Okay, let's say somebody teaches you how to ride a bicycle. And you haven't ridden a bicycle for 10 years. And you get back on that bicycle.
You remember them.
You remember. Why do you remember? Because you already have done it.
Right.
So when a person studies Torah, in their life, they have a memory of studying Torah before. So that's why they're able to study it a lot quicker. And that's why it goes into your brain a lot faster, because you've already studied it. So it's kind of like a blueprint in a way. So this is my blueprint. I've studied all this Torah, and now I can study it all over again.
Question.
Yeah.
What if non-Jew children in the womb? What they
So
study?
they study morality, the 7 Noahide laws, in the way that they need to learn how to act in this world. So they do study that.
They do.
Yes, and they study about God, and they study about how to behave with each other, and all these things they study before they're born.
And then forget.
And
but
then they forget,
then
right? So
learn
that's
it again.
why when they come out into this world, they remember that they need to be good people, because they've already studied it. They already understand it.
Why we have so many not good people?
Because God gives you freedom of choice. You can choose whether you should keep laws or not keep laws. And this is the problem. God makes it very equal. Anyhow, so let's go on. So there's this interesting story of the Beis Yosef, which is Yosef Caro, who lived in Spain from 1488. Of course, he left Spain because in 1492 all the Jews were expelled. So he lived around that time. He moved to Tzvat. And one time, he was very worried about something in Torah. And it was driving him crazy. And he was thinking and thinking and thinking, how could I deal with this? And all of a sudden, finally, after weeks and weeks of contemplating this idea, he understood it, finally. A week later, he walked into a study hall, and somebody was giving a Dvar Torah, means somebody was teaching something about Torah. And this person was teaching exactly the same thing that Reb Yosef Caro had to think for weeks and weeks and weeks. So he didn't understand what's going on. And it happened to be the base medrash of the Arizal. You know the Arizal? He's a big Kabbalist in Tzvat. So he went to the Arizal and he says, I don't understand. I worked so hard for so many months to bring something new into the world. And this guy was talking about it already, and he's not even such a great scholar. He's a regular person, a regular teacher. So the Arizal said, you brought this idea into the world. The minute you brought this idea into the world, every person in this world can teach it. Because it's already down here. So this is the idea of the womb. You learn it before. It's already inside this world. It's already in your brain. So when you learn it again, it's not hard. It comes pretty easy to you.
But then life shouldn't be so hard. It shouldn't be such a struggle to.
Life is what you make it. Obviously, there are struggles in life, but life is what you make it. The more you look at the struggle as something to make myself better, or something to get to another point in my life, or to get to a better place, if you look at that struggle that way, it becomes a much easier struggle. It doesn't feel as difficult in your life. Anyhow, let's get back to birth.
Okay.
Okay? So, the mitzvah to have one son and one daughter. That's the mitzvah for a Jew. Of course, people have much more children, but the mitzvah itself is one son and one daughter.
What about the 2 sons?
Well,
Or 2 daughters?
you actually can have a granddaughter, and that will be considered like one son and one daughter. But it's not your mitzvah, it's your husband's mitzvah, by the way. It's the man's mitzvah. The woman doesn't have to do that mitzvah. That's not her mitzvah. A man's mitzvah is he has to have one daughter and one son. The woman is good enough to marry somebody and let him have a son and a daughter. So she gets credit for that mitzvah.
All right.
Anyway, so you have your mitzvah done, actually, because you have 2 sons and 1 granddaughter. So you got it perfect. Now I'm saying as coming from you.
Right.
No. Okay. So, you still need a son, a grandson, right?
We still have lots of time.
You still need the grandson. It's coming. Soon. God willing. Anyway, that's interesting because there's 2 daughters. Not too soon? Yeah, whenever it's ready.
Right.
Whenever it's ready, whenever God would. So anyhow, in the Jewish tradition, you're allowed to use birth control. Where I know in Catholics or Christians, I think they're not allowed to use birth control. But Jews are allowed to use birth control if there is a physical problem or an emotional problem. So it doesn't have to necessarily mean that you're sick. It could be that you have a hard time having so many kids and you emotionally become very sick. So you can also take a break at that point too.
What about financial?
Financial is never an issue.
count.
Doesn't count. And you know why? Because the more kids you have, somehow the money comes. Somehow the money shows up. The more kids you have, the nachas makes the money show. I don't know how, but it happens. It definitely happens. So that's about having children. And then as we have a child, the first thing we do is try to name the child. For a girl, you name in the synagogue. For a boy, you name at the circumcision. And each person has prophecy when they're naming their child. So whatever name you give to that child, it was meant to be. This is your prophecy.
And it's like the women's choice what to name it?
It depends on which family you're in, but usually in most families they do 1 and 1.
Oh.
So either
What
the
does
man
it
has
mean?
the first and then the wife has the second choice, or the wife will have the first choice and the husband will have the second choice. I mean, that's usually
What
how it
other
works.
family? Like, what do you mean? Like a Cohen family or?
No. What I'm saying is usually depending on the family. Some families,
okay.
like Svardim, it usually goes by the man more because
Okay.
they're very dominant there. By Ashkenazim, it depends on what you decided. Should the wife have the choice first, or should the husband have the choice first? It's
Okay.
up to you. Okay, so, and the Jewish name is very important. And if we know that one of the things that the Jews kept in Egypt was their Jewish names. And that's one of the reasons that God redeemed them. Jewish names, Jewish clothes, and one other reason. Can't remember. Anyhow, but the idea was that the Jewish names was one of the reasons that the Jews were taken out of Egypt, because they kept their Jewish names. It was names, language, and clothes. Yeah, I don't remember the three
What
of them.
about clothes?
What were their clothes before?
They kept Jewish clothes, style clothes, whatever style clothes.
Like
they had.
yarmulke or?
Like what?
No.
No.
Yarmulke came later.
No, yarmulke's another story. That's a later
What
story.
is the clothes?
Clothes means they had specific clothes that they wore that signified that they were Jews.
They were different from the
Different
Egyptian
than the
clothes.
Egyptian clothes. Exactly.
They were slaves, right?
That's later. We're talking about even before they became slaves, but just in general. Okay, so now we have a question: is that why don't women get a circumcision? I'm not talking about physically. Physically, of course, they don't have that part.
Anything to cut.
Exactly, that's number one. And number two, the reason is because we're already from Keter. Keter is the highest level. Remember, we talk about the level of higher than even understanding. So we're already from that level. And it's just like, why don't men put on tefillin on Shabbos?
Why?
Because on Shabbos, everybody's on the level of Keter, which is the highest level. So therefore, the women are just like Shabbos all the time. So they don't have to put on tefillin, and they don't have to, and they don't have to do circumcision. They have that holy level already. And
That is the Mashiach. That's the Mashiach is a girl.
right. No.
What do you mean? What do you
Next.
mean? They cannot make
What?
circumcision.
What?
No, the girls.
No, I
about the
said a
girls.
girl doesn't need the circumcision because she's already on a high level. I'm not talking about physically.
I didn't
I'm
say.
talking about the idea of circumcision. Okay, so if we see, though, if we look at the level of Keter, if we look at the next week's Parsha, you also see that it says that Sarah lived how many years? 100. And then it says 20 years. And then it says 7 years. Because 100 basically means completion. It's Keter, it's the highest level. A complete is always 100. Then 20, which is Chachma, 10 for Chachma, and 10 for Bina, which makes 20. So Chachma is wisdom and Bina is understanding. And the 7 is for 7 attributes of a person. So she had all those levels, and then it says, Shnei Chaye Sarah. This is the life of Sarah. In other words, all these different components, maybe they were separated at different times, but they're all components of Sarah. So Sarah already had all these different parts of Sarah. She was able to reach the highest level, which is Keter, and then all her attributes, which is the lower levels, to take the higher level and bring it down to the lower level. And this is even better than just leaving everything at the high level. So a woman is able, especially because a woman usually, she's down to earth. She sees things for what it is. She doesn't just have an idea, but she brings the idea into fruition. Like she would take, somebody gives her some flour and some water and some yeast or whatever, and she could make a challah out of it. She has that personality. The same way when the man gives the sperm and the woman gives the child, makes the child. So she can take something that's spiritual and bring it down to physicality. So in other words, that's the idea of Sarah. The idea of Sarah, our mother. We are all like Sarah. What do? We take this little bit of what God gives us and we make something out of it. And this is what's important to understand. And that's the reason the woman doesn't need the bris milah, because she already is connected physically to this world and spiritually to this world. Whereas the man is not connected physically until he has the bris milah. And I'll explain to you in a minute why. So let's understand about the bris milah. Who was the first one to have a circumcision? Abraham, right? So the first one to have a bris milah, a circumcision. How old was Abraham when he had his circumcision? 90. Abraham kept the whole Torah. The only thing he didn't keep was what?
Circumcision.
The only thing he didn't keep was circumcision. Why didn't he do circumcision before? Why did he wait till he was 99 years old? You know that Abraham did the whole Torah, even though he wasn't told. But he waited for one specific mitzvah, which was circumcision, until he was 99 years old, until God came and said to him, do something. Before that, he didn't do it. Why? Why did he wait so long? He did all other mitzvahs.
He wasn't told.
But he wasn't told to do any mitzvah. He did all the mitzvahs of the Torah. The only one he didn't do was circumcision, and he waited for God to tell him. Why?
Till his son was born.
That was before his son was born.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's why the son was born.
Right, because he did the circumcision. There you go. But the reason why is because you can't do circumcision twice. You can only do it once. So he waited for God to tell him to do the circumcision so that actually he can do that circumcision. Can you imagine waiting all your life for something specific and then getting it? It's amazing. And this is what he did. He waited all his life for God to come to him and say, okay, circumcision time. And you have to understand what is this idea and this precious thing of a lifetime. This is the attachment of spirituality to physicality. Because it's done to a physical organ, you're taking something spiritual, which is the Word of God, and you're attaching it to something physical. And this was not done during Abraham's times. And this wasn't done at all until the Torah was given. Why? Because when was the next mitzvah given to the Jews? When they received the Torah. And what happened when they received the Torah? What was the difference between a mitzvah when they received the Torah and a mitzvah before they received the Torah? Anybody know the difference? Before it wasn't commanded, after it was commanded, but what's the difference? If it's commanded or not commanded. Okay, we'll take an example of Jacob, our father. He put on tefillin. It says that he used sticks to put on tefillin. But the sticks that he used, what did he do with the sticks when he was done?
Probably
Threw them away. Are you allowed to throw away tefillin nowadays? No, it becomes holy. So the spiritual went into the physical. So when you're commanded by God to do something, the spiritual commandment goes into that physical thing. So when God commanded Abraham to do circumcision, that circumcision became a spiritual thing going into physical. And that's why when Eliezer, his servant, went to look for a wife for his own son Yitzchak, he told him to promise to hold on to his place. Which place? The place where he got the circumcision, because that's the only place that is bonding spiritual and physical at that point. Nothing else. Because God did not give the 613 commandments yet. He only gave Abraham only one commandment. First commandment of circumcision.
I have a question.
Yes.
Why then, like, you have a plate of food and you bless the food, and then whatever you don't finish, you can throw in the garbage? Instead of, like, I don't know.
The truth is, bread you should not throw in the garbage. Because bread is actually holy.
Okay.
So because you're making a special blessing for bread. Also wine. A lot of times you pour the wine into a cup, and if you ever notice people pouring it back, it's because wine is very holy, because you've made kiddush on it. So you can't just throw it out. Same thing with bread. People take napkins sometimes and just put a napkin and then throw it out with the napkin, because you shouldn't be throwing it in the garbage, because it's something that's more holy. So usually food, it's not a good idea to throw food out. But if you have no choice and it's getting spoiled, you're allowed to throw it out because there's no choice, because then it's not holy anymore, because it's spoiled food. But you should be careful about food. It's true. Thank you for bringing that up. Anyway, so Avraham, going back to his bris milah, so that became a physical marker for him. right? But something spiritual into the physical. So how is the celebration of the circumcision? Do you ever see a circumcision? So you take a pillow, and you put the baby on a pillow, and you bring it to one person. Usually there's a couple. It's called a kfater. And this couple, if they can't have kids, or if they want to, they want to get a shidduch, or whatever they want, if they want something special, you usually give it to a man and a woman. Not necessarily have to be married, but a man and a woman. And a man passes it to the woman, and then they put it on a special chair, which is called the Kisei Eliyahu. And there's a
What?
Kisei Eliyahu.
Kisei Eliyahu, right.
Right? And why Kisei Eliyahu? Why Eliyahu Hanavi? Because it says that Eliyahu comes to every single circumcision because he criticized the Jews a lot. And when he passed away, actually he didn't. God took him up. Remember the story that Elijah the prophet went up to God. He didn't die. And he comes to every bris milah, every circumcision, because God's showing, you see this Jewish people, they're doing your mitzvahs. You see what's going on? They're doing my mitzvahs. That means that they're great. So he wanted Elijah the prophet to see that the Jewish people are still great. So every single circumcision, Elijah the prophet comes.
And then the Abdullah, they singing
Eliyahu Hanavi,
right?
but that's another story. Anyhow, so then there is a sandik, a person who holds the baby. He should be somebody that you want the baby to emulate, because usually when you give a sandik, that means that the baby will be very similar to the person who's the sandik. So you want to take a very special person to be the sandik. And then they have a mohel, which is the person who does the circumcision, and he needs to be very professional, because when you're doing a circumcision, you want to be careful. So it needs to be somebody who's been doing bris milah for years and years and years. That's what you want to make sure that you have, because I've seen some new mo'elim, it's not so great, but the old ones are amazing. They do it right away, and there's no pain, and there's nothing. It's 1, 2, 3, done. And there's no complications either, usually, when there's a good mo'el.
Right? Metita?
Yeah, no, we're not talking about that.
Yeah,
Okay,
metita.
anyhow, so then, then you say, Kamosha nichnesu lebriso shel Avram Avinu, just like you came in to the bris of Avram Avinu, this way that this child should go to Torah, to chuppah, and to ma'asim tovim, good deeds. Very funny story that when Sarah was born, I wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and I said I had a baby. And every time I had a baby, I usually wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and I used to get a letter back. This time, I got a letter back like a boy. I'm happy that you had a boy. And he gave me l'Torah, l'chuppah, l'ma'asim tovim. And usually for a girl, he says l'chuppah, l'ma'asim tovim. He doesn't say the word Torah, because a girl is not obligated to study Torah all the time. So I write back to the Rebbe, and I said, I don't know if you made a mistake or something went wrong, but it's a girl. So the Rebbe answers me, he says, it's okay, because nowadays, for a girl, you can also say l'Torah, l'chuppah, l'ma'asim tovim. It was a beautiful answer. Anyhow, so just saying.
He was alive still?
Yeah, of
Oh.
course. Yeah. Yeah, so
Not
he
like
answered
you
me.
on computer, right?
No. First of all, there were no computers at that time.
Yeah, that's right.
There were only, there were computers, but they were so ancient. Like you couldn't even use them. They were so hard to use. But anyhow, so I actually wrote a letter to the rabbi, like by hand, and send it. Anyway, it's interesting. So going back, so then you name the baby at that point. And then we understand that when do you do the bris? Which day?
7th, 8th.
8th day. Why the 8th day?
7 mitzvot, 8th day.
7 days of the week. And 7 is nature. And what's 8? 8's above nature. So it's a special number so that we should wish for our child to be above nature. So we do it on the 8th day.
I also read somewhere that the 8th day of life is like the only day that like our bodies release a certain hormone that like is really good for blood clotting.
Interesting.
So that's like
Interesting.
the only day that it's like at
That's
the highest
amazing.
levels.
Right.
It was like
Well,
wow.
the reason it's like that is because God wanted us to do it on the
Yeah.
eighth day, and so He incorporated into nature that specific thing, which is interesting. It's just like this thing from last week when we talked about the astrology. It's God incorporates into the astrology what He wants to happen. Same thing is He incorporated into the person's nature what He wanted them to do. So He wants them to do circumcision the eighth day. He incorporated a special hormone so that it's good for blood clotting. That's beautiful. I like that. Anyway, so the other thing is that Jews remained. And what happened to all the non-Jews that wanted to destroy us?
Disappear.
So Jews defy nature. That's why it's the eighth day. 7 is nature. The eighth day, it's Jews defy nature. We shouldn't be here, really. Because what happened to the Babylonians, to the Romans, to the, to all the different nations that tried to destroy us? Even the Germans.
Disappear.
They also disappeared. I mean, everyone, all of those disappeared. Okay, the
So
other
does
thing...
that mean the Arabs also will be disappeared one day?
Eventually.
Well, it says that the last nation before Mashiach will be the Yishmaelim.
Wow.
Because we're kind of going back to Abraham's times. So we started off with Jacob, right? And Esav, his brother. And then now we go to Yitzchak and Yishmael. Because Esav was the Christianity. They were dominant for a while. And now we go backwards, and the Yishmaelim are dominant. And then we go back to original Abraham. This is how it works. It works in that. So everything that happened in the Bible is something that will happen to us. So in the Bible, you actually, I heard this before, according to Kabbalah, you kind of go backwards from Jacob to Isaac to Abraham. So it kind of goes backwards, yes. Anyway, so that's what I'm saying. You're saying about the Arab nations. Yes, they are the Ishmaelim, and they are the last nation that's supposed to be over the Jewish people. Anyhow, so now the question is, why do we use the reproductive organ when we do the bris milah? What's so special about that? So number one, it's continuity, meaning that we continue life, because that's the reproductive organ, meaning that we continue on our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren. This is the organ that's used. And the second thing is to understand that we need to be in control of our desires, and especially purity in what? In relationships. We need to be very pure and very careful in relationships. And therefore, the circumcision is done for this specific organ. Okay, then we're done with circumcision. Anyone have any questions on circumcision, or we're clear more or less? Okay.
Question.
Yeah.
If someone could not been circumcised on the 8th day,
Right,
the man can do it later in life,
right,
right?
right.
Can be
Definitely.
done anytime, right?
You can do it at any time, yes.
But
yes.
not physical cutting.
Yes, physical. Yes, physical.
Physical.
Yes, I mean, there's a lot of Jews from the Soviet Union
Right.
that did it much later. And I know a lot of them, actually, because my husband worked with a lot of people when they came from Russia to help them do a circumcision as they came to America. It's very, very fascinating point is that when we talk about the pain, if they had relationship with non-Jewish women, somehow the pain is stronger. I have no idea why.
Huh.
Very interesting. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I don't understand why, but I've had a couple of cases like that. So the ones that didn't have relationship with non-Jewish women didn't have as much pain as the ones that did. Very interesting point. So I think that this is something connected to that. To that
I have a
idea.
question. Why in Africa they do female?
Mutilation? It's mutilation. It's not even
Is
circumcision.
it American so they won't have pleasure
Having
like
children.
sex with
Right.
their husbands,
Right,
right?
right. It's horrible. That's a really horrible thing. Yes.
My husband is example of this.
Yeah, he
I don't
also.
want to give her to.
Yeah.
We were going to synagogue for many years, and he never told he Rabbi Pil that he was not had
Circumcised. Mhm.
And when he told me, he said, "We'll do it. Let's do." So, but it's kind of just scary when you're in a
When you're an
Definitely
adult.
is scary as an
adult.
adult.
And I
yeah.
was with him, and it's interesting those days,
Uh-huh.
particular day. So we came, and so in the middle of process they did. So a couple things happened. So I found out result that my sister sick. The same moment.
Same
like,
moment. Wow.
he was there.
Wow.
But I should say those times the Rebbetzin Pil that in for my sister health. But when he asked us for whom you wanted, I said for some family who from this synagogue they didn't have a child
Wow.
and they were in a age they wanted children.
So you wanted you in the honor of that
For
person
this-
to have a
for
child.
these people,
Yes, beautiful.
and they got child.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So,
That's amazing. So you went. So you said that he would do the circumcision in honor for this person to have children.
Yeah, when he asked
Aha,
us,
I see.
Yeah,
No, that's interesting. I didn't
but
know that, yeah.
interesting that extend my sister life.
Really?
She's supposed to much less.
Right,
and-
right,
and
right. But you think that that helped extend
I
your
don't
life?
know.
Yeah. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But
nobody
that's interesting about the person having a child.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Anyhow, it's something. It's reproductive organ. You're right. So it's
Yeah.
connected to somebody having a child. So that's beautiful. Anyhow, so let's go on to Pidyon Haben, which means, okay, so the Jewish people are divided into three. They're divided into Kohanim, which is priests, the ones that work in the temple, and Leviim, Levites, which also work in the temple, but they do different work. And Yisrael means the rest of the Jewish people. So a Kohen is from the family of Aharon, which is the brother of Moses, and there is Levite family. What happened? So in Egypt, how did we get to this point? In Egypt, the firstborn was killed, and so God saved the Jewish firstborn. So God said that these firstborn are my children; they belong to me. And so, in other words, they belong to the temple service. So what happened later when they did the golden calf? God said, I'm sorry, the firstborn is not going to work in the temple. Now only the Kohen, which is from the tribe of Levi, will work in the temple. And so therefore, what happens when a firstborn is born? You have to make a special ceremony with the Kohen to release that firstborn from being a Kohen. So you give 100 silver, it's called 100 grains of silver, which is you have it in 5 different coins, and you make this process, which is called releasing the firstborn from working in the temple, and he gives it to the Kohen.
Is it firstborn or
Firstborn
pregnancy?
male, firstborn male that comes from the uterus.
Okay.
So if a person has a C-section, it's not considered the firstborn.
Oh wow. What if a woman like miscarries her first pregnancy or something?
I believe that it's a second child then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, has to be the first one from the womb. Yeah, no, first child from the womb. So I did that with Schneer. We had a Pidyon Haben, which is 30 days after the child is born.
Okay.
So he was the first one born, and so we had a Kohen come, and they made this exchange, and it was a process that they did. Okay. So then what happens at 3 years old for a boy? They cut their hair, right? It's just like 3 years that we have a tree that you're not allowed to take its fruits. The same way, we don't cut the hair of a boy. It's called upsherish until 3 years old. Yes. So next time we will do bar and bat mitzvah and other different things.
And why is Upsharon done on